This video is in response to a request for a more detailed explanation of implied harmony. The excellent question was raised as to why we actually hear implied harmony. What is it about it? So we're going to get into that in this video in more detail. Now, we do have to keep in mind that there is a certain level of subjectivity when we're talking about what people hear, because one person might hear something differently than somebody else. Now I'm going to begin by playing the first couple measures from a Chopin nocturne, the E minor nocturne. I'm going to play it first so that you can kind of warm your ears up. And then the second time I'm going to ask some questions, some things to listen for. So here's the E minor nocturne. Now I'm going to play it again. This time, think about these things. Does it sound more like harmony or melody in the beginning? Maybe both. Does it change from one to the other? And if so, what factors do you think contribute? So listen again. Okay, so what did you think? Let's go back to the first grouping of notes, the first three notes. Now, those probably sound like harmony to you, and there's a good reason for that. If we play them together, that's an E minor harmony. It's just they're reassembled. It's an inversion. Now, if I were to just repeat that figure repeatedly, with no variation, it would just serve as a purely harmonic basis for the melody that comes up later. But in the second figure that's added, you might have heard more melody than previously. Listen again. So did you hear a little bit more melody that time? There's a good reason for this. It's the minor second interval from C to B. So we could this highlights the important point that when we're dealing with more narrow intervals, minor and major seconds especially, they closely resemble scales with those more narrow intervals, and scales are what melodies are based on, so it's going to take on a more melodic quality. So as we increase the intervals, they lose that melodic quality and they become more harmonic than melodic. So the first contributing factor is the size of the interval. The second is the quality of the interval, because we have dissonant and consonant intervals, and consonant intervals generally have a tendency to sound more harmonic than dissonant intervals, which are the major and minor seconds as well as the major and minor sevenths. Especially the thirds and sixths take on a more harmonic quality, and that's because they are what define the mode. So in the example of this E minor here, that interval of a sixth from the dominant to the mediant, that's very harmonic, because that's what defines it as E minor. If it were G sharp versus G natural, then it would be E major. So it defines the mode of the tonal center. Now, another thing to keep in mind is the inversion that we're dealing with, because we generalized that the size of the interval matters. Now, the sequence from the tonic to the dominant to the mediant, now that doesn't occur within the first three chord positions that were traditionally taught, the root, the first and second inversions. If you watched my series on group theory, you might be able to recognize this as one of the higher inversions. Now, if we were to invert it to root position, where we go from the tonic to the mediant to the dominant, we have more narrow intervals, and so it might take on more of a quality combining melody and harmony. But since the inverted major third from the mediant to the dominant, from G to B, is the minor sixth, because it's wider, we're hearing less melody than we would otherwise. So the other example I'm going to play is also from Chopin. Now this is his B minor prelude. So I'll play just the first bar. Now in this example, again, it's an arpeggiated tonic. It's the B minor chord that's just spread out. The notes don't occur simultaneously. But because it's not alone, as in the example of Chopin, when it's alone, we might tend to hear both melody and harmony because music has to have both of those elements. But with this one, since the right hand is also a B minor chord, it's the same harmony, so we might hear more melody than harmony in the left hand because it's being accompanied by the same harmony. So we're hearing the direct harmony in the right hand, the implied harmony in the left hand becomes more melodic. So hopefully this has given a couple of good examples. One other thing I wanted to highlight is the importance or the difference between dissonant and consonant intervals sounding less harmonic. When we have, for instance, a minor seventh between C and B flat, this interval, or if we invert it to B flat to C, that's a major second, those by themselves are going to sound much less harmonic than the other intervals that are found in that C7 chord, the major third, as well as two minor thirds. So that's a good example of why we hear more harmony when we're using different types of intervals, like the consonant intervals, because those thirds are really what define the mode, like we talked about earlier.